Am I?
Maybe should I face this way? That's all good. You to present there. I'll spin around. Okay. Oh yeah. Sorry, and then you'll need to do that while share your screen.
Is that also in here?
Yeah, it's on the side of the green. There's a green button on the side there. Oh, yeah, the screen. Share, it's good. Can you hear us, man?
Yeah, perfectly.
Can't hear you.
Is Thibaut in France?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is good. 1 second, I'm just gonna. It's not USB.
It's the.
This one,
I think.
I don't see HDMI anywhere. You see Can you try again?
Hey, can you hear me now?
No, okay, 1 second now. Keep talking.
Yeah.
Talk.
No, that's the.
Oh, shit.
Yep, so still in France.
Right.
It's the end of the day for me, almost. 7 p.m.
Yeah, sorry. That's fine.
Still not?
This one?
No, down.
This one?
So we're gonna hear most about San Diego, right?
That's coming up here.
That's all the line. The Kodak is
Is
on.
that? Go again?
Hey!
No. Hey!
Just have too many devices. All right.
Hey Thibaut, how you doing?
Good, and you? How was San Diego?
Oh, it was great. It was great. But I look at you and think like, oh, there you are in France with wine that you could buy a big bottle for 1.2 euro and some bread and some cheese. Like, tell me about life in
hundred of the
France.
countries.
Oh.
Leader.
So,
Sorry, review that.
oh, I was just going to make a prelude to what happened, but I think you're the chief. I mean, just like, okay.
Thanks for coming, Kevin. Sorry we messed that up on the email. God, you're coming this week, but I'm excited to hear what you were up to. So for those, I guess everybody here knows Kevin, right?
No,
I don't think I've heard it.
Oh.
Or it's maybe been a while.
Maybe in passing. Well, Kevin used to be that student at 350 in 350.
Right, that was
Long time ago.
Devin would have.
No, I think that's more than two.
maybe two.
No, 3.
It was 2.5, I think.
Yeah.
There's 1 year where I wasn't there in between being there, though.
I think was Mike also TA?
Probably.
Yeah.
And then there's Sarah too. Okay, it's been a while.
Sort of a family affair.
Yeah, I guess I'll just say a little bit about myself then. Yeah, so my name's Kevin, and I guess I'm a fifth-year student at UBC in the Bachelor's in Geophysics program, but I'm going to be graduating in a couple weeks. Yeah, basically I've had some experience in doing applied geophysics in Germany so far. That was in an agricultural context, basically using GPR, trying to characterize the soil water content. And I guess I come to you today to talk about, actually, Timbo, can you hear me okay? I should ask.
Yeah, I hear you perfectly. Thanks, Kevin.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, so basically I come to you to talk today about this position I'm going to be doing as a geophysical survey trainer. Basically just want to tell you a little bit about it. I've had some conversations with Doug, and I would definitely appreciate all of your input on quite a few aspects of the project. So essentially it's arranged by Uzo International. They're basically a international development organization. They focus on volunteering abroad, and they get most of their funding from the Canadian government. And the placement basically going to be starting in early June. If everything comes through, as you can imagine, there are a lot of logistical and bureaucratic things that still need to be sorted out, but fingers crossed. So it's going to be at least a 6-month placement, potentially another 6 after that if things work out well. And I'm going to be working with the Department of Rural Development in Mon State in Myanmar. So just take a look at that map. It's about in the southeast of the country. I'll have a better map in a little bit. So I just thought I'd tell you a little bit about the particular context in Mon State. So compared to other parts of the country, for instance, you've probably heard about the conflict and the ethnic cleansing in Rakhine State, which is happening in the northwest of the country. It's made international news. This is kind of a bit out of the way, relatively peaceful and stable compared to that area. But it goes without saying that doesn't mean they don't have any issues. In particular, in the last several dry seasons, many of the villages have had quite severe water shortages. About 50 of the 1,000 or so villages in the state, the wells have run dry essentially. And they've had to, or the government officials have had to cart in water at enormous expense. And many of these people are quite impoverished as is. So it's definitely not an expense they can afford. It's also been the case that because it's very close to the coast, saltwater intrusion has been an issue in many parts. I'm not sure how prevalent it is throughout the state, and that's definitely one thing that I've been trying to find out. One thing that I found in just trying to do a lot of desktop research from abroad is that most of the geologic information doesn't seem to be digitized. So I've really, I think, found out about as much as I can from my comfy couch in Canada. And the next step, I think, is going over there and going to the local universities. I know the local university where I'm in the town I'm going to be in, they have a geology department, maybe the Department of Mines and the government. I think it's going to be a lot of talking to people. And that's the next step, because otherwise it's just kind of this brick wall. There's this short video I thought would be really cool to show, just describing some of the situation that's been going on in terms of water. Oh, I guess. Uh-oh. Maybe no sound, but.
So originally it was surface water, I guess. Looked like a makeshift pond, right? Ocean water pond.
I presume, but I think they're pretty reliant on groundwater.
Groundwater.
But is there also like a background, a host farm?
That's the other thing. I could only really find a national level.
Yeah, but like
geologic
at a
database.
national level, what's the host farm?
So, like from some cores nearby, there's some laterite, and then some kind of bedrock. But like the specifics were very thin on the ground. I'm sorry to say.
So basically right off where the delta is.
If you think about like the curve, yeah, just a bit east
delta
of
that
that.
comes out, and then they're sort of southeast of that, so they can't. There's a river run through Rangoon and then come out.
Yeah. There are a couple of rivers by there. Interesting next video.
That's also nice to do that.
Very related, obviously. Well, I wish there was sound, you could hear the passion in the voices. But and that video, in fact, was from just a couple weeks ago. So it turns out that the dry season has hit earlier than usual this year. In terms of the placement objectives, I'd say that there are 3 main ones. And the first two are pretty obvious. The first one, so the first is to build an inexpensive resistivity device based on a design that I found in a paper online from Dr. James Clark over at Wheaton College in Ohio. Basically, the Department of Rural Development, they don't actually have any geophysical technology themselves. And it's kind of interesting because the central government department does, but I think there's some kind of weird reverse power play. So they're not willing to lend it to each other. So because of that, that's why I thought, I'm gonna have to find an alternative approach. So basically, there's this design that James Clark has written about, and maybe in the past 5 years or so, he's honed this design. And basically his design parameter was that it was to be about or comparable to $250 US. Because in particular, for a lot of rural settings, they don't need to go particularly deep because the drills also can't go that deep, but it does have to be really, really cheap. I'll talk a bit more about that in a bit. The second one is to increase groundwater drilling success rates throughout Mon State. As far as I can tell, right now, they basically just drill at random, or maybe they use water divining. And then the third one is kind of a capacity building endeavor, which is to train the engineers within the department to, various factors, how to acquire, how to analyze, process, and interpret geophysical data sets in order to minimize the quite large cost that arises due to unpredictability, just drilling willy-nilly. Yeah, and I mean, it's all very preliminary, but at this stage, I would say that the two most important things are finding depth of water table and depth of bedrock. Yeah. As Doug suggested, I've tried to fit it into the 7-step framework, but it's not that clean. And also, I don't technically have any data yet, so it's kind of strange. But yes, anyways, the property that we're going with is electrical conductivity or resistivity. And the primary reason for that is because we actually have one data set that's previously been done. That was done in 2016 by a Japanese consultant with JICA, the Japan International Cooperation Agency. And so they came 2 years ago, but they were just a consultant. And it doesn't seem that they really made any effort to do capacity building. They just brought their instrument and then left. And that was it. So now, they're still having these problems and they can't do anything. And then here's a map that I made. And basically the red outline is Mon State. And the blue stars are where previous measurements were done by the Japanese consultant. I think there's some more, but these are the only ones I could access. So a few of these townships, as you can see, they're scattered throughout the state. But it's still a very small sample size, of course. Let's see. So what's that? Basically, the Japanese consultant, they used a Ciscal R2 plus resistivity meter, and they did Schlumberger arrays. And they found, I would say, moderate success. Out of the 7 wells that I was able to see, 5 of the wells drilled at those locations, they found viable sources of groundwater. And then the other things that the department, it seems like they are willing to, at least in theory, purchase more expensive, commercial grade equipment, up to 10,000. But basically, they looked for a few quotes and they couldn't find anything within that.
So what does MR stand for?
Oh, right. Yeah. So magnetic resonance.
Oh, okay. NMR.
Get what the S is. I think to deal with equivalence, that was the idea. They used MRS to fix some parameters. But that was in the central dry zone. It's a bit farther to the north. And unfortunately, while I have found this way to build resistivity instrument, I haven't found any cheap way to build an NMR. So that's, I think, the primary problem. Otherwise, I would totally go for it. Now I guess I'll show just a couple of the graphs from the previous data sets. yeah, it's very rough. But anyways, so this is the A spacing with the apparent resistivity, and from what I could tell, they chose quite a few layers, more than I would pick, but they have 6 or 7 layers in this model. And in this particular one, they estimated there being an aquifer between 75 and 165 foot depths. And they did end up drilling here, and they did find viable groundwater. Yep.
Can you elaborate a little bit more? Where was it? 75, 165?
Right. So basically around the minima.
Okay, there are multiple curves. So Kevin, there are multiple curves. If you can explain like what are the curves and dots and
Oh, sure.
You can use this.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. So I'm talking about this curve.
right.
The other curves, I'm not really sure what this big one is, to be frank.
Yeah.
And also this one with a bunch of steps.
Looks like
seems like way too many layers, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, I would guess that's your inversion model, but it may well be corresponding to the solid line. But it looks like you've got two, which is why they were concerned about equivalence, right? They probably got really like kind of a smooth model inversion. It has lots of layers, and then looks like they've got maybe 3 or 4. I can't really see another parametric model. Whether those both give rise to the same data or not, I don't know. But yeah, my guess is that the solid line is thoughts or observations. And then you're looking for a conductor. Is that the idea for representative of the water?
Yes, at least if you look at some of the other curves as well, yeah, it was always a conductor.
Yeah, my guess is like it looks like they're applying both data and the model together, I guess. So the solid line is your data fed, and the circles are the observed data, and the other lines are the inverted model, I guess. And then they're plotting it spacing.
That could be, I wish they provided more details, but there's just this short little box, a couple sentences about the interpretation. They didn't provide any details about the inversion or anything.
But like in terms of what, do you know why they're looking for a conductor? For instance, like fresh water could be pretty resistive.
Right.
I think like they really did, I guess, or do you have an idea why?
Yeah, so my feeling is, again, there's not nearly as much hydrogeologic information as I'd like, but just by the geography, I would think it's a coastal aquifer. So I'm gonna guess it's more brackish than typical.
So do you think that's a salt water?
Or partially?
Okay.
Yeah, this is all conjecture.
Yeah. Yeah, probably to kind of like know a little bit more about that. Also, it also depends upon which kind of like rock it's in.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah.
But that's kind of important information if you're using steps of survey.
But you had a couple of soundings where they had
Yeah.
drilling,
Yeah.
so you know a little bit more.
Well, so here's another one, and unfortunately, like you can tell they did the logging, but they didn't provide any legend. And I've been trying to obtain a legend for months, and I haven't been able to get one. So I guess there's a bit of information there. Some other of these logs have shown, I guess, right below the topsoil, a layer of laterite. But that's about the extent of the information that they give. Yeah, I don't know. Does this legend scheme look familiar to any of you?
I mean, John Penn, the last time I looked at logs like that was quite a while ago. but there are some resources out there for like more standard sedimentary logging symbols. I could try and pull one up. It might be worth looking at.
Yeah, like patches versus striped lines or things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If they use that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. I guess it's whatever this Japanese consultant happened to use, right?
Or it might just be that each one is different, and that's all that they're indicating.
I like stripes.
Yeah.
Do you know who the Japanese consultant was? Is it a company that would have some information on the website? Or?
No, I mean, basically, I only got these couple pages from the report, and all I know is this Jika. I don't even know the person. Could try to find out. It might be helpful. But yeah, anyways, so these two ones were where water was found, and that'd be useful to include a plot where it failed, and it failed because the aquifer was too shallow, essentially. Yeah, here's 48 feet to 115 feet. Yeah.
I'm so sorry, by too shallow being, it was shallower than they predicted, or?
Shallow, if they in a large volume of water.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Oh,
Or for most of the year, I guess the water table was lower. Or that was my interpretation. Yeah, I mean, there was only this little text provided at the bottom, which was a translation of the original Burmese. So again, there's that's why if you read it, the grammar, it's kind of weird. Yeah, the water level will be low, will dry in summer. Water level will go down. So I think it has to do with the water table. Yeah, and there are a couple more. Yeah, I'd be happy to send them to you after if you're interested. Okay, so I guess I should talk about the resistivity device I've been mentioning all. So yeah, this guy James Clark, he's written a few papers about it, and basically the design considerations is that wants to be cheap, less than 250 USD. As we'll see, to actually make a robust instrument for less than 250 is not really possible, I think. Another consideration is simplicity, especially if there's been this NGO called Water4, which has been building many of these devices. They've cited hundreds of wells using this in many African countries. And because they're training so many people, they're training people at other NGOs, and those people at other NGOs are training people at other NGOs. That's why they really didn't want to go for commercial systems. I suppose because they can tend to be black boxes. And so in that situation, they wanted simplicity. They also wanted robustness, and kind of the same reason it should be easy to repair in the field, necessary. And also because of travel considerations. A lot of airlines, they won't let you have a car battery on. And so the system should also be relatively light and compact and not have any big batteries. Yeah, so here's some specs. I actually have, I guess, some materials. It's not fully built yet, but yeah, I could show a little bit actually.
Oh.
It was my plan to have the thing built by today, but unfortunately some parts have been just nightmarishly difficult to obtain. I should have organized this better. Anyways, yeah, so the system that's being used, basically just cheap multimeters, 2 of them, it's fine. Yeah, I bought a soldering iron. I've been learning to solder. That's part of it.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I guess I'll show you these two typical. So yeah, these are the parts I've done so far. I guess it's not that much, but yeah, the idea is that there are these 2 switches, DP/DT switches, and that's so you can switch polarity in the current direction. Basically, the idea is, yeah, I guess to account for induced induce polarization and spontaneous potential, switch it back and forth 4 times and then average it. That's been the field procedure used so far. Oh, sure. This is just me and my friend. I recruited my friend who's an electrical engineer. Yeah. Okay, please.
Just interesting that it's a DB/DT switch.
Yeah, so this is just our rough work, and yeah, this is the capacitor. It's 1 microfarad. Yeah, so things like that.
Microfarad, that sounds small.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
So are you going to bring the cables as well? So you need some sort of multi-channel cable like that, whatever, 10 channel or 10 channels.
Well, so I guess this is just single channel. So that's.
Oh, I see. So you're like it's one. I see. 2 current electrodes and 2 potential electrodes.
Yeah, it's pretty basic.
Oh, I see.
I mean, it would be great to have like 2D sections, but I guess it's a matter of cost and weight and various things like that. Well, or yeah, or that.
Connect the wires to the electrodes all the time. You do it.
Yeah.
A lot of manpower.
But when I was looking at your data, it was like it was a kilometer. Like the largest spacing was a kilometer.
So I think that was a Japanese consultant.
Right.
Yeah. So one thing about the system, which may be the Achilles heel, is that the depth of penetration, at least in the African context, where it's been tested, it's been maybe 35 down to 35 meters reliably, and at least from the little data that I've seen, it seems like the aquifer, the range is something like 25 to 50 meters. So we might be able to get part of it, but depending where we are, it could be out of reach. So for a time, I was considering things like getting a more powerful inverter, maybe an amplifier. But I couldn't find an inverter that was that converted 12 volt DC to 240 volts or 230 volt AC. I could only find the North American ones, which are 120 volts AC, and that I think essentially cuts the depth of penetration in half.
What if you just cut a hole right through the laterite, pass the resistor, and connect right in the closer? You have enough power, right? Dig a hole.
Oh,
10 meters.
Yeah.
Plug it in.
10 years.
not when you're used to inverting data. A kimberlite pipe, that's hundreds of meters. 10 meters, that's nothing.
That's a good
You know what
point.
I mean?
Yeah. That's a good point. Okay. How would you get down into the hole though?
But what if your electrode is actually like a rod, and you dig as deep as you can, and you just like drive it as far as you can, just pass the laterite. Like,
Oh, okay.
just pass a resistor, because that's kind of your shield right now.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay. No, that's a good point. Yeah. Anyways, right now I have a 400 watt, 12 volt DC to 240 volt AC shipping from the States, because I just happened to talk to this guy who's been working with this NGO, and he had a couple spare inverters from Kenya. He said they were pretty reliable. But yeah, I scoured the internet and I couldn't find any inverters that I wanted in Canada. Pretty discouraging.
How hard do you think it would be? I don't know if it was into making an inverter, but talk to somebody in the electrical engineering department. They make their own cheap inverter. Yeah, I don't know.
But my friend's specialty was actually more the computer side.
I mean, there might be somebody around who, like, it might not be that difficult at all. I really have no idea what would be involved in it, but it might be worth at least talking to somebody and just let them know what you're looking for and ask. Like, they might know even a good source to go track down. Because I'm sure that they'd have to. Buy.
Yeah, that's true.
Buy grade.
The person that I should put you in contact with is he's an emeritus professor, Don Russell. He's built tons of stuff. And he really, is a real expert on anything that has to do with, generating something to collect electrical measurements. So we should, I'll put you in touch with him after. And he'd be really happy. He'd be really happy to help. This is something that would really spur him on.
Okay. Oh, that's fantastic. Okay. We'll talk after that. Yeah. So, anyways, this inverter that I should be getting, fingers crossed, it should produce a DC no load voltage of 330 volts. Yeah, there's the capacitor hooked up to a full wave bridge rectifier. Yeah, and I talked about the procedure, and that's just the circuit diagram. I'm not an electrician. I can't say I really get it, but just putting it up there. Yeah, so in terms of the performance, as I've said, it's typically less than 35 meters. Now, as Don mentioned, I think there is quite a strong possibility of conductive cover of unknown thickness, but and as I've discussed with Doug, it really depends on the mineralization. I am going to be going right in the peak of the rainy season, so depending on the ionic content of the groundwater when it infiltrates, I think that could really change things, or the depth of penetration. Yeah, but anyways, in kind of ideal conditions, this is just some results from a test site in Nigeria using the system compared to a commercial grade Sting instrument. And you can see up to about the 35-meter depths. It's pretty good in comparison. Yeah, here's just a picture of the whole thing at work. Yeah, so here's the breakout box with all the connections, the current, and then the voltage electrodes, and then it's a really blurry image. Yeah, the two multimeters, the inverter, that's the Kenyan one, four cord reels.
Looks like a pretty serious car battery. You compare it to like the size of the multimeters, like it's bigger than most car batteries you see around here.
That's true. Well, I guess it's about what I can find, right? Because I can't bring a car battery on the plane, so we'll see.
And you could also probably hook several of the car batteries up together. Try a little more out.
Yeah, just to make it last longer.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, here's a more detailed look at the control box and just showing the I and the V's. Yeah, and then those are the switches. So they have three positions. There's up, down, and the off position. Yeah, and this is showing how it looks when it's all packed. I guess whether it's going to be less than 50 pounds is another question, but we'll try. One thing is that these cord reels, I've actually had a lot of difficulty finding cheap ones. Cheapest I could find was about $35 each at Canadian Tire. For 4 of those, it really adds up when the budget is only a bit more than $250.
Is that just a plastic or a tin reel? What are those cord reels?
So I think those ones are just plastic.
You're talking about the physical reel or the reel with
Sound like
wire?
that should be very expensive.
Just the physical, just the plastic.
Just the plastic.
Yeah, just to wind the wire around.
I think
Yeah, actually, if you know of any way to get cheaper ones, I would really appreciate that.
$5 just for the reel.
Yeah.
that's,
Right.
I mean, you're going to be spending.
Stuff in China on your way here. You ended up buying this for $2.
Like you might
It's
be
just
able-
plastic. I mean, really, it should.
You might be able to, like a lot of those hardware stores and stuff, like Home Depot and some of those places, they sell the wire off the spool by the meter.
Yeah.
So like if you went and talked to them a little bit in advance, and just said you needed some of these empty spools, like I don't think they'd probably do anything with their empty spools when you're done with them. Probably just recycle them and throw them away. So if you went and talked to some of these places and told them what you were doing,
Yeah.
and just asked them to save any empty spools that they might have for you, they might be willing to do that. And if not, it wouldn't be too hard to make your own school. Like we could talk about, I could help you. I could help you make some of those schools if you need to, not out of plastic, but we could make them out of, we could make them out of wood, or we could probably even make them out of metal. Needed to for less than $35.
Yeah, I was thinking metal would be better actually, because if it's a whole bunch of wire, then you're stretching it out. The plastic is just going to fall over.
And you're gonna be wet in the field, right? So
yeah. Well, it's going to be real wet. I think in the peak of the wet season is about 600 millimeters per month. The tropical rainforest kind of conditions.
Ventures.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is the inverter that was used in Kenya. Yeah, a fellow I've been speaking with, he had a funny story. But anyways, this one worked a lot better than his top-notch, state-of-the-art inverters that he bought here. Yeah, and so basically it's a modified sine wave. Yeah. Here's just the example of the whole thing in action. Yeah, okay, and then I guess now getting to the data considerations. So I think typically they've been using the Wenner setup, but they're both not too bad. I think the limiting factor is, again, the power of the inverter in terms of the spacing. They found in the field that typically using the Wenner array, they can get about as far as a spacing of 60 meters, and then after that, just the power attenuates too much over that distance. Yeah, and I guess the other element then is the data processing analysis. I know that it's kind of your specialty at this group. So James, the guy who invented this, he also has, I think, a free and open source software package, and I've seen a bit of it. It's called Best Resistivity Inversion, and basically for 1D apparent resistivity sections, it does a 1D Monte Carlo inversion. And well, it's better if I show this. Yeah. So here's an example of the data set. Basically, you choose your number of layers, and then those boxes represent the search space for the inversion. And then based on those, based on the thickness and search space in the resistivity space, it will give you a model. Yeah, and in this is the way that he's been doing it. I don't know if it's actually best practice, but basically he says just look for the the flat spots and then pick the number of layers based on that. Preferably we'd have actual geological data to base it off of. So hopefully I find some more that get there. Yeah, here's an example of just the data sheet. So each test point, 4 measurements, and then 1 and 3, I guess, are the positive, and then 2 and 4 are the negative values. And then based on that, it calculates their resistivity. Yeah, here's an example of just the GUI for the software. And it calculates an RMS error, and I'm told that it's an iterative process. You try to minimize the error. Yeah. So actually, I really appreciate your input. This is just one way to do things. I know there are tons of other ways to do inversion. Yeah.
What do you have, first of all, just for forward simulations? Does he have is that set up so that you can just put in a background model and just compute what the data are easily, or is that buried in a bit?
I haven't seen it. Okay, well, yeah, with that, I guess talk a little bit about basically my plan. Again, very open to feedback. So the first 2 weeks is going to be an in-country orientation, a bit of language training in the capital of Yangon. And then after that, I was thinking the first couple weeks, really depends, but try to talk to people, find hydrogeologic data just from the local area. I know that they have a bunch of core, and someone's logged it, but I just don't know where to find it right now. So it's actually really frustrating. Hopefully I can find that, perhaps potential existence of other past surveys that were done, besides the Japanese one. Weeks 5 to 6, Doug recommended that I basically go do a calibration by surveying at the same points where the Japanese consultant did, seeing the instrument actually works, try to reproduce results, and then basically from week 7 and onwards, go to new villages. I'm sure because the dry season earlier this year, there are going to be lots of villages that need new wells to be drilled. Yeah, and just finishing up, yeah, here's a list of some challenges that I anticipate. I guess I don't really have a conclusion side because the work isn't finished by any means. So I think the first one that I expect by far is going to be adverse weather conditions, just freakish rain, and the conductive screening effects that may produce. Also, just more practically, impassable roads. I was talking with Ross Polnick at SJ Geophysics, actually. He said that they had a team there doing some gold exploration a while back, and actually just the rain meant that they literally could not pass because the roads were mainly just mud at that time. Yeah, second big one is if the depth of penetration is too small and the water table just dries up. Third one is, I guess, if because of those first two things, this doesn't produce meaningful results, what do I do? So one thing I was considering is that Geoscientists Without Borders, they have a grant, which is due actually sometime in July. So I haven't really thought too much about this, but maybe if I could apply for a grant and secure funding to get some other instruments. I know that in some other areas of the country, time domain has been more effective in dealing with the conductive screening. Fourth thing, but definitely not the least, is the language barrier. Insofar as the second big goal of this project is to build capacity to help the engineers. I'm planning to leave the instrument there, so helping them to be able to use it and continue to train other people after I've left. The language barrier could be a big issue. I was speaking on Skype with the head engineer at the department, and he said he understood about 50% of what I said. So especially when it comes to technical language, I think this could really make things difficult. Fifth thing is ability to obtain replacement parts. I've heard stories about the nightmarish bureaucracy in Myanmar, and I'm sure that applies to imports. And then sixth is that at the department, they don't actually have that many computers. Like, it's not that every staff has a computer. Actually, a lot of work is just done by hand. So just in terms of just having to do a lot of calculations by hand, or that's how they're accustomed to doing things. Using software heavily might be a bit of a challenge at first.
Do you want internet this life?
Yeah, well, that's problem number 7. So I'm going to be, I guess I didn't mention, I'm going to be in a kind of small town called Malamine. It's about a population of 100,000, a bit southeast of Yangon. And I've talked to a former volunteer. They said that electricity was actually okay. They could teach some students English in China on a regular basis on Skype. So I guess that must mean it's at least somewhat okay. Yeah. Now, like in terms of going to these remote villages and doing surveys, my feeling is electricity is going to be a lot harder.
What about mobile?
Mobile. Oh. Yeah, I don't know about that.
Because during a pinch, you could send, it's probably going to need that anyway. It's going to be like a bite size and data. Send it to someone outside, process it, send you back.
Yeah, that's true.
You don't need to do it there.
Or just old-fashioned notebooks. Backup.
Numbers or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I'll finish up just with I guess a bit of my brainstorming as to how to actually the educational component of it. So first thing I think is field demonstrations, and the engineers like themselves, they've they've requested of me that, I don't just give lectures. They really want to get the practical knowledge out of it. Yeah, so data acquisition, QC processing using free software, whether it's the one I've been talking about or perhaps another kind. And maybe, yeah, a couple desktop-based lectures or tutorials walking through the software, correlation between strat logs and resistivity kind of stuff. But yeah, I'm very open to ideas, and I think this is just the beginning. So yeah, that's
Definitely is the beginning.
Yeah, that's it for.
Awesome.
So can I ask a kind of a larger scale question? So
Sure.
This is a project by CUSO, right? And like, what's this, the support group that you have, or who do you interact with? And like, if you were able to kind of, can you sketch out on the board, the groups that you interact with and who's actually there to help you out to do certain things? Because my goodness, you can't be expected to do all of this. And then, if you do get into, some challenges, who's there to help you and step in, and where do you fit in this scheme of things?
Sure. Is it okay?
Sure. Yeah.
So let's see. There's CUSO, and then I guess kind of allied with them, because they're the funder, would be the Canadian government. That's kind of abstract, though. I think more practically. So basically, CUSO, you could say they arranged this whole thing. They talked to the Department of Rural Development, with whom I'll be working, to determine that there was a need for this kind of thing. I have one contact at CUSO, one in Ottawa, and then there's one on the ground.
On the ground in Myanmar.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, in Yangon, so not exactly where I'll be. His name is Hwaisan Ang, but he told me to call him LB. I'm not really sure why. Yeah, so this is LB. And then, this really needs to be fleshed out, I think, but the DRD, they're a bunch of engineers. I've been told they mostly have, say, civil and mechanical backgrounds. And yeah, basically, they're the ones who've been mostly doing the drilling. And
So they're basically funded by the government, are they, or are they
well,
companies?
they're part of the government. Because, so this DRD, this is the state government.
Okay.
Yeah, I should specify. Yeah, monostate.
So then when you go out to a lot of these sites, you're gonna be going with the engineers and their drilling equipment. And like, you're maybe gonna be like collecting the surveys, and you're gonna be processing the surveys within like a day or two, and they're gonna immediately be trying to punch a well, or?
That's what I thought at first, but I think it turns out that at least for the peak of the rainy season, they don't do any drilling. They can't. So I think the feedback time of doing the surveys and then drilling those locations could be long, especially in the first little while.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would say, at least for the first part, no drilling. But I would be going with at least a couple at all times.
Okay.
Yeah, also because I don't have a driving license there, I need someone to drive me around. A lot of these are pretty remote towns.
Yeah, and you may need a serious car to get in and out of somewhere too.
Yeah.
Hopefully. And it just, somebody who knows the local area will kind of know what you need to get into where, hopefully.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
Things you need to have with you in case you get stuck. I get unstuck.
Yeah, and then I guess the other aspect is, I'd say there are three main people: Randy, Ray, and then James. So James is the inventor of this particular inexpensive system, or the sorry. And then Randy is this guy who's, I think, been working with the engineer in Africa, and he's been doing it for something like 10 years. But no, actually, he has a lot of practical advice for like all those spreadsheets. That was all him. And he said he'd be willing to help out with things like interpretation. I don't think he doesn't have any particular geophysical knowledge. It's basically just what he's picked up in 10 years.
This Dr. James is where?
Wheaton State in Ohio.
Okay.
Wheaton College.
But what's,
I think he's more a hydrogeologist actually, but then not a geophysics.
Do you know where the Japanese consultants will kind of fit into there, and is there some connections that you can make with them?
I think they would probably be independent. Yeah, I suppose I was always picturing just a lone consultant, but it could have been a team.
And do you know how they would, like, who they're actually connected in with this group?
Yeah, so I think when they did the survey in 2016, that would have been with, well, I guess my background. That would have been with the state DRD.
Would you be able to find out, contacts within that DRD of people who are kind of familiar with the groundwater problem, familiar with what went on with GeoSci.xyz, just so that you've got some contact in the DRD that you'll be interacting with, who knows something about the history of what went on. And,
right. Preferably they would have been there.
Yeah. I mean, that might be your into getting a lot of background information about, what the project was, what you were able to do, what the outcomes were.
What problems they ran into.
Yeah, that's a great question.
So from your perspective, you parachute in, you got 50 pounds of stuff, right? And then, okay, where would you be physically, do you know where you'd be physically located? And then, who's going to help you kind of plan what your places that you're going to go and why you're going to go there and what you're going to expect? I mean, where does all that kind of fit in? Is that the engineers, or is that up at the DRD level?
So, sorry, LB, he's not a technical resource person. I think he's basically the one who I formalize the placement objectives.
Is he in Miramar or is he?
Yeah, he's in Miramar.
Okay.
He knows both Burmese and English. It's great. Yeah, but I think in terms of on the ground problems, if I need a battery, I don't think he'll be able to help. Probably that my contact for that situation is probably someone in the GRD who I haven't met yet. Yeah, but honestly, it's not clear to me whether I have a supervisor and who it is in the GRD. I think I'm just expected to, but LB is supposed to help us figure this out once I get on the ground.
Pretty tall order.
Yeah.
Could you, do you have good enough communications with LB that you could start to set up, a bit of a plan, like just kind of kind of imagine, okay, this is how it's all going to unfold. I'm going to come into Miramar. First of all, where am I going to be? How am I going to kind of work with somebody to kind of plan, a field survey, prioritize where I want to go, what my objectives are. Right? So there's that scale, and then there's also the practical scale of like, okay, now I'm going to need these kinds of equipment, or I'm going to need these amount of personnel, and where do I get that? Who's going to be in charge of making sure that happens? Because if you're out there and suddenly you need a shovel, okay, you don't want that. That's not a level that you want to be operating at, right? You don't want to have to be responsible for trying to buy a shovel. Just to somehow kind of do a virtual experiment. I mean, if you thought about that, like, okay, you're going to sit here and do a virtual survey, and how's it all going to work? Who am I talking to? Who's going to make the decisions? Who's going to be able to help? And I think the more you could kind of plan that out and fill in contacts and names, and get them involved before you actually get on board.
Thought about it, but never in that much detail. So that's appreciated. I do with LB, but he's really busy right now. As I mentioned earlier, there are also some kind of silly bureaucratic things that need to be taken care of, and I think he's kind of swamped with that right now. I can ask, but I'm pretty sure he wouldn't have time to do this planning. It's really good idea.
Well, he might not have to micromanage planning, but he would be able to, make sure the linkages are there. I mean, actually, maybe you could work with him to design what the overall look and feel of this is, and who you're going to be interacting with, what questions or what things you want to do at different levels of interaction, and that may not take very much of his time, right? But he seems to be your contact. So
right now.
Well, yeah, and I think you need to get as much of these things in place before you actually launch in there. I mean, actually, it's probably easier to contact people from here right now than it might be when you get to Miramar, even though you're in closer proximity. Like, okay, now I can't get internet connection, or I can't get this, or you might just end up being extremely frustrated because you don't know what you can do, you don't know what you should do, you don't know how to get it done, you don't know who to talk to. That could be really frustrating.
And two, getting people invested before you go is really important. Because then you have one or two, like all you need is one person that that you go to if something goes wrong. And so making sure that you have somebody like that in place beforehand. And two, like I know as you were saying, he's quite busy, but I think the biggest challenge with something like this is just identifying what the questions are and who you potentially are going to need to contact. Once you have that like sketched out of like, I need somebody who's going to help me with on-ground logistics. He probably already knows who that'll be. And so like either putting you in contact with that person, if that's too hard of a thing to do. And if he doesn't, then you know that, okay, this is important that we actually like go and find somebody who can do this.
He said that he might be able to get me a translator. So I'm feeling that they would be, maybe not in logistics, but they would be able to, they know a lot more than I would.
Yeah, but they probably won't know like the lay of the land necessarily, like within a given organization. They may or may not. And so like as much of that you can sort of at least have a first glance picture of what you're walking into there. I think that you can make some headway on that here.
Yeah, I guess it would help if I knew more about their organizational structure, but I don't. I kind of just pictured it as a couple engineers. It's a state,
Yeah.
Well, it might be, but you just need to know, you need to make contacts in those places so that you've got a support and you've got some guidance as to what you can do, what their objectives are, how to help you out when things, you have a question or you have a need.
I guess in terms of the place, I know where I'm based, and presumably the villages are also in the state that need one school. Yeah, but they haven't told me details. Like, oh, you're going to this village and this village and this village. Yeah, okay, I'll obviously try to get into contact.
I think it'd be good, and what you could actually do is imagine making up some kind of, I don't know, it's a flowchart or map or contact map with questions or something, and you could use that as a basis of communication to talk to people and say, look, here's where I think you're fitting in. If I get into Miramar and I have these kinds of questions, or if I want to get this kind of information, who do I ask on there? And again, just as Lindsay said, the more you can get for engagement or involvement of people, even if they just submit a name or something, then at least have got a sense about your overall project, how it's fitting in, and they add one thing to that, and then they're kind of invested, and then they're interested. So the more that you can get out of that, I think. So I think where the group here could help, but it's at a level that's like far less, I think, important than all of this stuff that you have here. And certainly, there's lots of expertise to do forward modeling, simulations, and versions, and then also you did mention that you had to train people and get them to understand the technique and things like that. So I think there's a lot of resources here that could be brought to bear.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking just along the zeros 350.
Yeah, and then recently we've developed a whole bunch more for a course on electromagnetics.
Oh, yeah,
So we
okay.
can point you to all of those resources in your books. And like if in terms of inversion and things like that, we could set up some simple notebooks that you could play with and use for teaching, as well as actually inverting data if you want. Yes, those are all things that we can help.
What are you doing? Everything is according to plan, May 31st.
At the end of the month.
Oh.
It's like 2 weeks, yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Are you going to connect all this here?
Try.
Yeah.
I mean, because they're instructions, and they've been following them, so far it's not too bad.
Then you can test your system here at least. Or...
Yeah, of course. I think just the inverter is probably going to arrive pretty close to what it's leaving, so I probably won't have that much time to test. Yeah, but what you're saying about the inversion help, I think that would definitely be appreciated. I'm hardly an expert on inversion at all, so.
That's the easy part.
Yeah, I think in the overall structure, like you can almost put a tick there, right? There's a little bit of stuff to be developed, but yeah, there's a lot of other. So I think from the point of view of like building the system and any questions that you have from the point of view of data acquisition and electronics, I mean, there are people in Vancouver that can help you out. I mean, you said you've already talked to Sid Visser, right? Yeah, but at SJ, right? And so maybe you've got some background in that. I would really recommend Don Russell. He has time and he's got expertise, and this is something that he would be interested in. So
Start writing this.
we can contact him immediately after this.
Yeah.
Your spool problem sounds like that should be really easily solved, but I'm not sure.
Sorry, is there another pen? Thanks a lot.
And then wire, those kinds of things.
You're not gonna carry the wire over. Like, you're gonna carry the wire there, because wires are not.
Can be heavy. If you're talking 60 meters.
Or strands,
Yeah. They call for 1,000 feet, so that's 300 meters.
They won't divide.
I mean, it depends on what gauge, how thick the wire is. But
14 gauge, stranded.
I think that much wire pretty easily like 25 wire.
But that's, I mean, I guess that's okay from the point of view of taking things over, right?
Check an extra bag.
Yeah, that's,
I mean,
that's
you had a
such a-
contract with people at the DRD. One of those engineers might have a very good idea of how easy it is going to be to get 300 meters and 14 gauge strand wire.
Right.
If that's not a problem for him to get, just delegate it to him and let him get it for you. He can probably get a better deal, he can probably get a better price on it there from his sources than you can here as a private person anyways.
That's a great point.
Did Ross say it was particularly difficult to get certain things into the country? Because I know some places, you bring some piece of technology they don't know anything about, and they go in and then they get really curious or they hassle you. I don't know if I've heard some.
He didn't comment on that, but I'm not sure.
One thing to ask him is I heard a couple people, I know a guy who works at SJ as well, saying that certain places they go and they think everything is fine because they went to this country and then they go in and then all of a sudden it's taking them forever to get their equipment through security.
Yeah, that's important. I'm gonna try to get a letter from the department just so the airport people don't think it's a bomb. Or something like that, which it might look like a bomb. So.
You got wires. Well, are those lag bolts that you were putting in for electrodes?
Yeah, lag screws. Is that not a good idea?
Oh, I don't know. I've never heard of anybody doing that, but usually it's some kind of a stainless steel rod or something.
Yeah, well, that's what I used too. I think they're just more cheaper because I saw some spikes and they were pretty expensive.
Oh, I see.
You only need 4.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you could lay out a lot of them if you had a lot of them, and then just move the wire, like jump the wires around to different ones in different combinations. But you could get by with just 4 of them. It's just if you're actually trying to drive them, you're not going to get in very deep
Yeah,
either.
how hard are they? How long are these?
They were calling for 10 inch.
That might be okay.
It's not that long.
What are they made out of?
Galvanized steel.
Oh, okay. Might be fine.
It's just if you're driving with a hammer, all of those threads will be in the biggest time offer a nice smooth surface. It's going to easily slide down into the ground.
Well, you can screw it in.
So yeah, you might
It is.
Maybe you may need a ratchet. Thread bolt into the ground.
Yeah.
Instead
Like,
of hammering it.
I have a pretty heavy duty rock hammer. That's probably overkill.
I mean, you'd probably be wanting to use like a good sized sledgehammer.
Yeah. Okay.
A kilo and a half head on it.
Okay. Okay. Well, if the soil is really wet, it shouldn't be too hard. If it was like super dry, I'd be more worried.
Yeah.
You gotta test your system now before you go. Test it. Because your whole operation depends on this.
Yeah.
Is that okay if we?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much.
Oh, Declan, are you still
My
on?
pleasure.
Yes?
Oh, hey, I sent you an email last night asking about the connectivity model that you had for Hawaii, because we're going to use an example with topography and with some structure inside that might resonate with hydrologists, and show the advantages or the needs and some circumstances that use 3D as opposed to just 1D. So, did you ever do a forward modeling and even just a 1D inversion?
So I only did 3D for the modeling. So I do have the a couple of conductivity model I can send you. I was just doing this thing right now.
Okay.
Yeah. So right now I only have for the modeling or just model. So I didn't do synthetic inversion.
No, but okay, so that's okay. So you've actually run the forward modeling, and that's for an airborne source?
Well, no, it's actually for MT.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, but you can. I have the model. You can just run the airborne EM just by using the model.
Sounds good. What is the scale? Scale,
So the scale, I'm kind of looking. Yeah, it's relatively big. I think the size is about like. Let me take a look. So the scale is something like. Just give me a sec. Like 6 miles by 6 miles.
Where's the site? I'm just curious.
It's a big island. This is Hawaii Island.
But what part of it?
It's a western tip of the Hawaii Island. The one is having the volcano eruption now.
Yeah, but that's in the south. That's Kilauea. Yeah.
So the thing I did, like basically just comparing two different conductivity models and see the data sensitivity. And there's one particularly interesting problem for them to figure out is so within the mountain or the volcano, the water table is very interesting. There is a sharp increase of the water table going towards the mountain.
Okay, that's interesting.
So it's like,
Sorry, you're in the southeast of it or southwest? Or...
West. So it's if you look at the map, so the thing is, let me take a look.
Maybe by Kona?
It's somewhere called Kiholo, or somewhere called Koaho. I have no idea. It's a westernmost tip of the island.
Okay, it's like northwest, not.
Yeah, kind of a northwest, not the really northwest, but.
Yeah.
in that case, was the water resistive or conductive?
So it's kind of interesting. So it's somewhere between. So on the west side is ocean, and also the blackish water that's more conductive. But above the groundwater is a volcano. It's a basalt. It's kind of like something really resistive. So it's somewhere between the. Basically, what we're doing is looking for a relatively conductive object within a volcano, which is resistive.
Oh, okay. So the freshwater still is then conductive, is that?
Yeah, compared to the host, compared to the basalt.
Well, if you could provide A, the model, and B, do you have just a little bit of background geology, some text, a paper or something, just to put it into context, just so that we present this model and we say, wow, this is actually emulating what was happening in Hawaii, and here's the geologic context. Yeah, then we're kind of good to go.
Yeah, I do.
It looks like we're really focused.
I can just send you right away. I do have everything archived.
Okay.
Yep.
So Dequan, that will be a GIF mesh and UBC mesh and UBC model, right?
Yeah, it's based on the UBC GIF code. Yeah.
That sounds great. If you could do that, that'd be great, Dequan.
Yep, no problem. I will send it right away.
Okay.
So the files are relatively large, so I probably just send you guys the Dropbox link or like Google Drive link so you can download.
Sounds good.
Good.
Perfect. Okay. I was looking.
All right, well, thanks again, Kevin. We can continue.
My pleasure.
offline if you are-
Sure.
So what's the most exciting food that you have eaten, Thibault? And what's the best wine that you have drunk? And yes, what other stories do you have from France?
Oh, so tons of good food and good wine, so it's gonna be hard to tell which one, or we need a list or a top or something.
Well, maybe you could just
Otherwise-
can you just send us back a case and then we can judge for ourselves exactly.
I'm a lot too bottled in my suitcase in the plane, so I'm gonna definitely bring by at least 2. So it's such a shame I cannot bring any. Otherwise, yeah, like the first wedding I had to go went well. The next one is this weekend, and I'm back in Vancouver on Monday. So.
Whoa.
Okay. Well, that's pretty tough having to go to all these weddings, you know.
Oh yeah.
You're holding up very well. Although I must admit, when I saw this very, very small image of you, I was kind of wondering if, like, was that a terrorist there, right? It's the mustache. You have to be careful now.
Yeah, Europe is a dangerous place.
Okay. Okay. Well, listen. Have fun at the weddings, and
Thank
we'll see you next week.
Yeah, see you next week. Thanks for broadcasting again. Thanks, Kevin. That was really nice. Wish you good luck.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
We'll see you later.
Thank you.